Hello BookTube, welcome to Lizzie Faye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth, and for today's video, I'd like to do a Saturday Shelfie tour, and I'm going to show you some of my older vintage books. And maybe not all of the editions are vintage, but the books themselves are all older. I have this shelf right here, and then another shelf right up here, and I'm going to show you all of those. Some of these I have had since I was a child, and others I have collected as an adult. This first series I have collected as an adult, but I remember them from my childhood. It's the Happy Hollister series by Jerry West. This is the first book called The Happy Hollisters. And then I have a few that do have dust jackets. I have The Happy Hollisters and The Secret Fort, The Happy Hollisters and The Whistle Pig Mystery, The Happy Hollisters on a River Trip, and this one I got fairly recently. It does not have a dust jacket. It is actually printed right on the hardcover. It's The Happy Hollisters and The Monster Mystery. And it almost seems like I have another one of those with no dust jacket, but no, I don't. Okay. Sorry, thinking out loud. Okay, now, my third grade teacher is the one who introduced me to the Happy Hollisters, and her collection in her classroom looked just like this, with the exception of that. I had a puppy once that took care of that for me. That's why it's like that. And I have the Happy Hollisters and the Swiss Echo Mystery, the Mystery of the Totem Faces, Secret of the Lucky Coins, At Seagull Beach, The Mystery at Mistletown, The Ghost Horse Mystery, The Indian Treasure, Mystery Mountain, Monster Mystery and Mystery Mountain. I was thinking those were the same. Okay, but they're different. The Haunted House Mystery, At Circus Island, and The Punch and Judy Mystery. Now, at some day, I hope to maybe replace this one, but I don't think I have run across another copy of that story, and I would like to just read them. I mean, I'm not that concerned about how they look. I would just like to read them one of these days. And then I have a few Nancy Drew books, The Secret of the Old Clock, The Bungalow Mystery, The Secret of Shadow Ranch, Nancy's Mysterious Letter. And this one I have had a long time. This was my sister Charla's. This was the only Nancy Drew book that she had, and she passed it on to me. Password to Larkspur Lane. All right, these three I have bought as an adult at book sales. I would love to find more of the Waltons. I didn't even know that they had actually done novelizations of the Waltons, but this one's called The Bird Dog, and there's Jim Bob on the cover. And I've got a copy of The Swiss Family Robinson, and I have not read either of these. And then a copy of Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne, and I have read this one. Okay, so moving on up to the other shelf, I have Tales from Arabian Nights, and I have Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. I read this edition just a couple of years ago, maybe even last year for Booktubeathon. The book is not in good shape. It was in some of my neighbor's things, and when she passed away, her kids gave me a bunch of books, and this one hadn't been very well preserved, but it's still a really cool book, and I enjoyed reading it. All right, the next few have to do with Louisa May Alcott, or they are by her. I have The Quiet Little Woman, A Christmas Story by Louisa May Alcott. Then I have The Newbery Winner, The Invincible Louisa, The Story of the Author of Little Women by Cornelia Meggs. I have a really pretty edition of Little Women. I have a really cool edition of Little Men. And then none of them match at all, but here's an edition of Joe's Boys. I really do like this this cover. I got this, oh goodness, not maybe about a year and a half ago at a book sale, and I really like it. And then this is the only one of these Louisa May Alcott books that I have had since a child, since I was a child. And so I read this at a very young age. It's called Eight Cousins, and I really enjoyed it. I read this way before I ever read Little Women or anything like that, and I think my sister may have given me this as a gift when I was a kid. So I'm not absolutely certain about that. It may be inscribed. Let's see. Oh, it is. Oh, wow. Look at that. This is from my sister. Sorry about that. To Elizabeth Fay Jones, Christmas 1975. Hope you enjoy reading this and many more. Happy reading. Love, Charla. So I would have been in the 6th grade in Christmas of 1975. And that is when I read this in the 6th grade. Okay, now this is a book that was on my shelf in my room growing up. It was not my book, but when we cleaned out my parents' house, I decided to keep it. I believe this is the edition that I read. It's a bind-up of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. I believe it was my dad's book. Oh, no, it's got my brother's name on it. I'm sure he doesn't care if I have it. Although I think now that I unpacked it when I brought the rest of the stuff that I had stored from Oklahoma, and I saw that it had his name on it, I was thinking then that I probably should offer it to him. And I probably will, but he'll probably just tell me to keep it. And then here's a couple more books that I have had since I was a kid. They used to have dust jackets, and I don't know what has happened to them. This is The 3 Trips by Margaret and John Travers Moore. I remember reading that. And this is While Mrs. Coverlet Was Away, and it is by someone named Nash. Goodness, can't hardly hold the camera. And oh, look, there's the cover. It's just got torn. Mary Nash. And I remember reading this too. This was a lot of fun. And I think there was a whole series of Mrs. Coverlet books, but that's the only one I ever had. All right, this is probably my most special old book, The Shepherd of the Hills by Harold Bell Wright. This was my grandfather's book, and my grandfather died of a stroke in his early 40s, but it's got his name written inside, and we have seen this play a couple of times. They do a production of this in Branson, Missouri, and I have read the book. I didn't read this edition because I didn't want to mess it up, but I really am excited that I got to be the one to keep it, and it means a lot to me. Then this is one of my dad's Zane Grey books. Now, when I say these books were in my room, because the room that I lived in as a kid had been my brother's room, and before my brother was born, my dad had some books stored in there. So they just kind of continued to live in my room as a kid. And so I think there were maybe 3 Zane Grey books that were on the shelf. And so my sister and brother and I each kept one. And this is the one that I kept, The Last of the Plainsmen. And I'll have to see if I can see what year this was from. Oh, look at this. My dad got this when he was in the Marines, because it says Private First Class Charles R. Jones. And I don't know what that means. It was originally 50 cents. I had to pause the camera and look in it. It looks like this edition is from 1936, but it was originally published in 1900 something. Now I can't remember. So anyway, I'm excited to have this, and I hope to read this one of these days. Then I have 2 books by Ellsworth Thane. I believe these were in my parents' bedroom on my mother's bookshelf. I have Yankee Stranger and Ever After. So these were 2 of my mother's older books. And then this was on her shelf too. It's from the 80s, but it just looked interesting, and so I decided to keep it. A Novel of American Life, Fillory by Marguerite Noble. And then back to the shelves that lived, the books that lived in my room on my shelves that were not necessarily my books. These probably originated with my siblings, and then they just continued to live in my room, and they got a little bit, they're a little worse for wear. But it's a set of children's books that has excerpts and short stories from a variety of children's stories. And sometime I'll maybe do a video of what all stories are in here. I did read some of them as a kid. Like this one has an excerpt of Little House in the Big Woods. So those are pretty cool, and they are definitely worse for wear. All right. And then Heidi to Read Aloud. I have had this one since I was a kid, but it was stored at my mom's house, and so it suffered a little bit. and I decided to go ahead and bring it home. I don't think it's the full edition. I think it's an abridged version. And then this one I have had, and I've kept it with me all through the years, Trail to Oklahoma by Jim Booker. This is a story of the Trail of Tears, and I remember reading this as a kid. My mom, I think, brought this home to me one summer. She used to always bring me one of the Little House books from her. She would buy them at the college bookstore when she would go to teacher conference every August. And I think one year she brought me this one as well. And I enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed learning about the Trail of Tears. Of course, there were a lot of devastating things that happened, but I was really happy to know a little bit more about my heritage since my great-great-grandfather was a 6-year-old child on the Trail of Tears. All right, then this is a newer edition, but my mom gave this to my daughter Emily, and we have read it together. It is I believe it's an abridged version of Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm by Kate Douglas Wiggin. And then here's a couple of books that I just picked up at book sales. The World's Modern Cookbook by Mabel Clare. And as you can see, it's not very modern anymore. It says it's the kitchen guide for the busy woman. And then I love stuff like this. Meal Planning and Table Service by N. Beth Bailey. And it's got some I think it's got some pictures of, well, goodness, hang on. Well, I thought it had pictures of table settings, but it just has drawings, so not that interesting. This is a book that I read a couple years ago. It's the Hiawatha Primer. I learned that it is pronounced Hiawatha, and I had read some excerpts from this story as a kid, and I found this at a book sale, and I enjoy having it, and I did read it in its entirety just a couple of years ago.